commander-in-chief. So here to unpack all of this with us, Julia Manchester, national politics reporter from The Hill, Republican strategist Matt Keelan, and David Carlucci, Democratic strategist and former New York State senator. Thank you all, and there's so much to talk about. I want to start with you, David, on this age issue. You know, President Joe Biden will be in his 80s if reelected. Former President Trump is 76 years old. How big is this in voters' minds, and how legitimate is the concern?
Well, I think everybody says, oh, they're old enough, we want someone new. But the reality is that unless you have someone, it's always easier to pick this fictitious person, this person that doesn't exist. And that's what particularly you see on the Democratic side. They say, oh, Biden's too old, we want someone young. But then you ask them, who exactly do you want? And it's hard for anyone to draw a conclusion. Biden's got a record of success that he can run on. And if he's running against Donald Trump, he's going to be reelected as president of the United States.
Matt, I want to ask you, we're looking at new data today showing that more Gen Zers are turning to religion than in previous elections. That's from the Springtide Research Institute. Knowing what we do about the power of the evangelical vote in general, and with issues like abortion and religious freedoms top of everyone's minds this cycle, how could these voters change the dynamics in 2024?
Well, I want to agree with David. First of all, I think you can't replace somebody with nobody. And the Democratic Party, unfortunately, right now doesn't have the greatest bench. On the Republican side, we have several people already running. Someone like Tim Scott, who's running as an evangelical Christian, who I think will really resonate with those voters and talk about values and issues that those voters care about. The last, two presidencies, Trump and Biden, have seen a lot of controversies, a lot of partisan divide. And I think what those voters are looking for is someone that can try to bring about a unity message. And I think somebody like Tim Scott is the perfect person to deliver that message.
Julia, I want to go over to you for a moment because Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has been a little tongue-in-cheek about whether or not he'll run. Take a listen to his response when a reporter asked about how he's polling compared with the former president. Do we have that sound ready? Okay. I don't think we have that sound ready, but Julia, let me ask you, and let's be blunt here. It's only a matter of time until he announces he's running. What's with the hedging here?
Look, I think it's the result of him having a not so great week last week, Natasha. Look, he came to Washington, D.C. He used to be a former congressman himself. And as he was heading to Washington, D.C., and as he was meeting with many of his former colleagues in Washington, D.C. on the GOP side, you saw all of these members of the Florida delegation endorsing Donald Trump. That's really embarrassing for a sitting governor of Florida who is very much considering a run and who is seen as a rising star within the Republican Party. That being said, though, look, I don't think we should necessarily be writing Ron DeSantis's political obituary yet. I think back to 2015, 2016. I want to say that at this point in the 2016 cycle, a man named Scott Walker, a former governor of Wisconsin, was the front runner. So a lot can change, but last week just wasn't a good week for Ron DeSantis. So he wants to be very careful about how he approaches this issue of 2024, especially when he's visiting a foreign country like Japan, where he is with the First Lady of Florida, and very much trying to test the waters about how he looks on a world stage.
David, I want to go back over to you. What about the issue of the 6-week abortion ban in Florida? Will this potentially be a liability for DeSantis if he does make it to the general election? Is the country with him on this?
Well, I think that the problem that any of these candidates have is it's a fight for the middle. And Ron DeSantis is going to have to make it through a Republican primary that's going to be nasty. And I just frankly don't see him being able to do that. And then if you do get through, you're painted as extreme. And I think that's what any politician that is going to try to get elected in the general election needs to avoid. So I think Ron DeSantis has one problem in front of the other before he can actually claim that nomination, the biggest being Donald Trump. We've seen people rally behind Donald Trump, as you said, Florida politicians endorsing him over the sitting governor. So Ron DeSantis has a big problem. Abortion could be one of them, but I think the big part is just painting that extreme. We're not changing anyone's mind on abortion, but could you change an independent voter to see, hey, this is a little too much? And I think that's what any of these guys any of these people have to do to avoid being seen as too extreme, but at the same time, getting through their primaries is going to be a real challenge.
I want to talk about the former VP for a moment, and we'll go over to you with this question, Matt. We're still waiting on former Vice President Mike Pence to make an announcement on whether he will launch his presidential bid, and he is going to be live on NewsNation in just a couple of hours on our new show, The Hill. But in a crowded Republican field, does Pence offer voters something that Trump and DeSantis can't?
Absolutely. I think he's a steady hand on the wheel. He's a two-term governor. He was in House Republican leadership, former vice president. I think he's somebody that a lot of people look at as a serious statesman. And I think he'll definitely have a lane if he tries to run for president this time around, or if he decides to run some other time or some other office. But there is definitely a group of people, particularly, as David was saying, in the middle, who watched how the vice president handled his vice presidency under some turbulent waters and liked the way that he did that and tried to be a statesman and bipartisan.
Okay. Julia Manchester, Matt Keelan, and David Carlucci, thank you all for joining us. Appreciate